Middle of January in Minnesota and it's raining. Pretty weird, crappy weather, but anyway, we're gonna have a little fun with the Raptor today. It hasn't been out of the back garage in probably close to a month. As you can see, it is in deep sleep mode on Ford Pass, which is totally normal. That happens after 14 days go by and the truck isn't started or driven at all, so not a big deal. You just can't do anything from Ford Pass. You can start it normally from in the vehicle though, so I keep a battery maintainer on it when I know I'm not going to drive it for a while anyway. But enough of that. Today we are going to install 1-inch spacers on top of the rear coil springs, and then later this week we're doing a 1.5-inch leveling kit up front with collars. So some cool stuff going on. Gonna show you some of that here today with putting the spacers in, and then the leveling kit later this week. So let's get the truck up into the heated garage. Okay, first thing we're gonna do is take a few measurements of the height from the ground to the wheel arches, so we've got some before and after. So it looks like my truck is a little bit higher on the right side. Left front is 40.5. Right front is 40 3/4. Left rear is 42. Right rear is 42 1/4. So 1/4 inch taller on the right. Gas tank is mainly on the left and it's full. So that might be part of that difference, but otherwise pretty close. So that's what we're starting with, and I'll show you guys what I've got here. So these are the Foutz Motorsports 1-inch coil spring spacers for the back, and then we've got the SVC collars for the front. These are supposed to raise the front 1.5 inches. So right now we are 1.5 inches lower in the front than the rear. So after we get done with this 1 inch in the back and 1 inch in the back and 1.5 in the front, we will have a 1-inch difference front to back, with the front being 1 inch lower, which in my personal preference is about perfect, so that when I put some stuff in the bed, it's not running around with the front end high. That's my preference, so that's where we're going to be, and we'll get going. We're going to jack up the rear end, loosen up the or remove the lower shock mount, and then we should be able to just jack the truck up until there's enough space to pull the springs out. Alright, I'm sure a few people aren't going to like my jack setup here, but we've got chocks in front of the front wheels, and it's actually really stable. You know, I fit under the truck without it even jacked up, so not much of a concern, but pretty quick and easy here. Detach the shocks on both sides, the lower mount. You need a 15 and an 18 millimeter wrench or sockets to unhook the shocks, and then basically just keep jacking it up until all the spring pressure is let out, and you've got some space up there by the top mount to get that spacer in. So from there I'm going to get the spacer in and we'll start the video again there. Okay, so once you've got it jacked up and you are able to pull this spring out of the mount there, you just put the spacer in. There's 2 bolts that hold it. There are 3 holes in the spacer, but only 2 holes in the mount, so, and they only give you bolts for 2 of them. Line up the holes. You need a 6 millimeter Allen socket or wrench and a 17 millimeter socket or wrench for the nuts. Crank those down tight. You should be able to just slide the spring back in there, and then when we let it down, just make sure everything's all lined up and we should be good. But I will do the other side and check back. Okay, I'll show you guys how I did this side a little bit closer. That spring out of the way. Okay, I'm going to let the jack down slow, make sure everything stays lined up. Okay, don't want to go too far before you hook up the shocks. If you go too far, then you got to try to compress the shocks, and very difficult. So I'm going to slide underneath and get it lined up to where I can connect to the bottom of the shocks. Then we'll go all the way down after that. Alright, we got the shocks all hooked back up on the bottom, so everything looks good as far as the springs lining up with the spacer. We're gonna go ahead and drop it the rest of the way down. Well, it's been a couple days since I put in the 1-inch Foutz Motorsports rear coil spring spacers in the back, and I've now also got the SVC Offroad 1.5-inch leveling kit up front. So I'll show you guys. I didn't get any footage of putting that leveling kit up front like I did with the rear spacers, but I'll show you what's involved in all of that. So it's really not too difficult. This is the leveling collar here. So all you have to do is remove the shock strut from the vehicle and then put it in a spring compressor, compress the spring, remove the nut that holds everything together on top, and then slide the whole shock body out. Once you've got the shock or the spring off of the shock, this is the factory lower perch. It just hangs up on a little collar that's underneath there. So all you do is tap this with a rubber mallet up. You slide that all the way off the top of the shock, and then you slide this leveling collar on, which mounts around the factory collar that's on there. So you just tap that down with a rubber mallet till it's all the way down and stops. Then you slide the factory perch back on. You do have to pay attention to the orientation of this. You want the spring, end of the coil spring, in the same spot as when you started. Slide that mount back down, put the shock back up inside the spring that you've got in the spring compressor, put your nut back on top that holds everything together, and then remount the strut in the truck. And that's really all there is to it. You do probably gonna need to check the alignment and get that adjusted, so I did that as well. The camber and caster were still well within specs. The toe was a little bit out, so made a small toe adjustment and we are good to go. So that's the front. Now I just showed you the rears, but give you a peek at that again. So for the rears, we just put that that 1-inch spacer, blocking the light, but this 1-inch spacer in here, this is the factory upper rubber mount. We just put this 1-inch spacer in between there. So we're up 1 inch in the back and 1.5 inch leveling kit up front. I'm gonna get the wheels straightened out and then I'll measure it and compare it to where we were before we started. Okay, I got the wheels straightened back out. Show you here on the front left, we are right at 42 inches. Where we started was 40.5, so we got exactly 1.5 inches there. The back here, we are right at 43, which we were at 42, so got our inch there. Before we started, the passenger side was a little bit higher. I think it stayed that way. I got a full tank of fuel on the driver's side right now as well. So this side is about 43 1/8, so 1/8 inch taller passenger rear. And up here, also about 42 1/8. So yeah, the passenger side's about 1/8 inch taller, but like I say, I got a full tank of fuel, 36 gallons. That's over on the driver's side, so that might be the difference there. Maybe not. 1/8 inch isn't too big a deal, but so we started with about 40.5 in the front and 42 in the back, so we had 1.5 inches of rake, the back being 1.5 inches higher than the front. We took the front up 1.5 inches and the back up 1 inch, and that's what the measurements are shown to be as well. So right now we are right about 42 in the front, 42 1/8 on the passenger side, and 43 in the rear, 43 1/8 on the passenger side. So now we have 1 inch of rake between the back and front, with the back being 1 inch higher than the front, which in my opinion is perfect. That way, if I do throw a bit of weight in here or do some towing, it won't be as drastic with the nose sticking up in the air. So that's pretty much a wrap. Everything installed pretty darn easy. I will get this thing out of the garage and parked on a level spot so you can get some better footage of it. Okay, here's some shots out in the sunlight on pretty level ground here.